Hey everyone, and welcome back to TCM Notebook, where we take traditional Chinese medicine topics and break them down into more digestible tidbits for you to understand. This video is a continuation of the Yin and Yang video that we created. We're going to dive deeper into the mutual consuming of Yin and Yang. Now, the reason I'm focusing on that in this video is because I think later down the road it's really important to grasp this concept of the mutual consuming of yin and yang, because you'll see it come up into stuff like pathology, TCM patterns, and then TCM diagnoses. So for this video, we're going to recap and review the mutual consumption of yin and yang, and we're going to try to provide some examples of what you can see in the clinic or in case studies down the road. Now, before we get into the topic, let's just do a quick refresh on yin and yang themselves. Remember that these aren't static categories. Yin and yang is always moving, they're dynamic, and they're always trying to balance each other out. They're interconnected, yet they oppose each other. But they also rely on each other as well. So those are, as you can recall, the other concepts of yin and yang. They're constantly transforming and seeking balance. So you have that ebb and flow, this push and pull. But then what do we actually mean by the mutual consuming? It's actually quite literal. Yin and yang have this tendency to consume each other, or when one is greater, the other gets diminished. If one side increases, it naturally uses up or reduces the other. So in that aspect, one becomes deficient, whereas in the other becomes excess. Here's your first insight on deficiency and excess. And I'll make another video of this down the road, and you'll hear it in your coursework as well. But this is the foundation of, excess and deficiency. So let's go into an example. So we'll stick with a really basic one. So think of a campfire. Your yang is the fire, right? So because fire is immaterial, it's the energy. And then the yin is the fuel, so the wood is material. So the larger the fire gets, the more it consumes the wood, the yin. So the hotter it gets, the more it evaporates the moisture and consumes the wood, the yin. In a more physiological example, think about physical activity, exercise. If you're overworking through exercise, you're using up a lot of yang energy. So in essence, you're consuming your body's reserves, your physical substances. So the yin, you'll then naturally need to rest to replenish all that yin. So in that example, you're burning the yang, you're using up the energy. The more yang you use up, the more yin gets depleted, the more fluids you go through. So what you'll see on screen is a diagram that is going to be used a lot in a lot of coursework when demonstrating or illustrating yin and yang imbalances for excess and deficiencies. I'm going to use the same charts. So I'm going to try to bring in some clinical examples and pathologies to illustrate the yin and yang mutual consumption and yin and yang imbalances. So let's take this first image here as your baseline where yin and yang are balanced. And then this next diagram we are demonstrating illustrating where yang is in excess. So if you remember, when yang is in excess, it consumes yin. So try to imagine a patient with a very high fever. That intense heat, or the excess yang, is actively burning up and consuming the body's cooling fluids, which is the yin. So you'll see symptoms like severe thirst, dry skin, scanty urine. And on the other side of the coin, with this diagram, you have excess of yin. And when you have excess of yin, it's going to consume yang. So on the flip side, think of someone who's constantly exposed to extreme cold. In Chinese medicine, that doesn't just mean the temperature or the environment. It could also be excess of cold, damp foods over a long period of time. So when you're exposed to so much cold, externally or internally, for a long period of time, it's going to eventually consume the yang. So your body's warming functions and activation functions are tampered. This could present as deep chills, cold arms and legs or fingers, digestive sluggishness, and most commonly a lack of energy. So when one side is deficient, it leads to a relative excess of the other side. So let's go to yin deficiency. So yin deficiency will lead to yang excess. So if you look on the chart here, it doesn't show that the yang bar is above the line, but because the yin is deficient, there's not enough yin, there's more yang in the body. So with the absence or with the deficiency of cooling, moistening aspect of the body, it simply can't hold yang in check anymore. So yang isn't necessarily excessive, it's just without enough yin to balance it, it appears to be in excess. So you get symptoms like night sweats, sweaty hands and feet, or a low-grade fever. And finally, we have yang deficiency leading to yin or relative yin excess. Remember, keyword here is relative, so often called false cold. So if the yang or the warming energy in your body is weak or deficient, it can't warm the body or transform any of the fluids. This allows cold and stagnation to, accumulate and become relatively excess. So remember, it's not that yin is excess or there's too much yin, it's that there's not enough yang, and therefore yin is more predominant in the body. So you get symptoms like feeling cold, pale skin, and most common one or more important one is edema and fatigue.